Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. We are continuing with the reading of Iqbal's Reconstruction of Religious Thought in Islam. So we had covered this part, and the idea that thought is essentially finite and for this reason unable to capture the infinite is based on a mistaken notion of the movement of thought in knowledge. And in this context, we looked at Hegel's conception of infinity and his distinction between bad and true infinity. And we, in the last session, basically provided an overall assessment of the paragraph which follows. But today we are going to look at the paragraph itself more carefully. So it is the inadequacy of the logical understanding, which finds so logical understanding is important here. Logical understanding. Logical understanding. So logical understanding is inadequate it's essential but inadequate, which finds a multiplicity of mutually repellent individualities with no prospect for their ultimate reduction to a unity. Logical understanding is based on distinctions. Logical understanding works based on concepts, and concepts basically divide things based on distinctions. So even though they create unity within overall difference or unity within overall unity depending on your viewpoint, but they also divide things from other things based on their classes. So conceptual differences concepts are unities but unities which differentiate particular unities from other unities, and by inference or as a consequence they also divide things into mutually exclusive individualities. So that's the logical understanding, which finds a multiplicity of mutually repellent individualities with no prospect of their ultimate reduction to unity, that makes us skeptical about conclusiveness of thought. So conclusiveness is important here. Okay, let's reflect on this bit first. So what we see is, okay, so there are a few things Iqbal is talking about. Logical understanding. And by logical understanding, although Iqbal doesn't say it here, it seems to me it's what Kant understand by understanding. Concept of understanding, at least part of it. So understanding for Kant is the faculty of judgment. And it judges according to concepts. And concepts are obviously pure concepts as well as empirical concepts, but that shouldn't detain us here. But what is important in Kant's understanding of concept is that concepts divide the region of being into different chunks. So concepts divide the different regions of beings into different chunks or different blocks. So for example, you have the concept of animals. I mean, you have the concept of humans. And obviously there are a lot of things are there which are common between humans and animals. But when we are dividing them into different chunks, different blocks, we are ignoring here the commonalities. And focusing on differences or divisions, so to speak. And similarly, we are combining humans into one block and animals into one block here. But obviously, in combining them together, we are focusing on their commonalities and ignoring differences. So this dual process. So within the block, we are focusing on commonalities and ignoring the differences. But between different blocks, interblocks, we are actually focusing on differences and ignoring the commonalities. So we are uniting and dividing, and we are uniting by ignoring the differences, and we are dividing by ignoring the commonalities. And this is the logical understanding Iqbal is talking about here, logical understanding. And what is wrong with logical understanding? The logical understanding is inadequate, specifically in coming with overall unity. Because what it does is unites by dividing. So that's why although it has some sort of unity, but that unity itself is part of how it divides different regions of being or existence. And because of that, let's go back to our text for a minute. Because of that, so it is the inadequacy of the logical understanding we just described a bit, which finds a multiplicity of mutually repellent individualities. Mutually repellent individualities in terms of conceptual blocks, I guess, with no prospects of their ultimate reduction to unity. So although understanding through its conceptual distinctions divides or unites the region of being into different unities, but there's no overall unity. And that's what I said, it unites by dividing. So it unites certain individualities under the umbrella of these blocks of concepts or regions of or blocks of being, but without providing an overall unity. And even when it does provide overall unity, that unity of being, it doesn't say much about, it can't say much about what is being, because of the way it works through dividing and differencing. And when there's only one unity, then it can't say much in terms of conceptual its conceptual apparatus. That is the only apparatus of logical understanding. So which finds the multiplicity of mutually repellent individuality with no prospect of ultimate reduction to a unity. That makes us skeptical about the conclusiveness of thought, that is, the ability of thought to close the circle or to provide us with ultimate answers or provide with ultimate unity. Okay, so just look a bit more closely at these last two things we said. And again, taking Kant as our sounding board. So in terms of logical understanding, or I'll just use understanding. In terms of understanding, which is the faculty of judgment, the tool is concepts. So concepts provide unities, but those unities are unities only in regional terms. They don't provide overall unity. The other thing is that the unity that concept provide is also unity in the sense that it is external unity only we are able to look at those unities only externally. So in that sense, concepts understanding provide unities, but various blocks of unities, but there's no overall unity within those different blocks. Now, reason, on the other hand, according to Kant, has ideas which are, and these ideas are not concepts. And the purpose of those ideas is to basically provide overall unity. The idea of, for example, universe, for example, as a totality, or the idea of God, for example, or idea of being. But these ideas and reason, according to Kant, is as opposed to understanding, reason by its very nature reason tries for conclusiveness. Want to arrive at sufficient explanation where after which there is no further explanation needed, and also it wants to provide overall unity. So that's the ambition of reason, and its tools are ideas, and the way it does is through inferences, interconnecting things, not through concepts. So ideas are different from concepts in the sense that they don't divide in order to unite, but they aim to provide unities among all the individualities, all the blocks or regions of being. So in that sense, reason would be what Iqbal is looking here, or what Hegel would look for in this. But the problem with reason, according to Kant, is that it is, although its ambitions are infinite, it has limitations, and that limitation is that it can work, it can work, or it can provide us information only based on the information it gets from intuition. And our intuitions are all empirical intuitions. That means the unities reason provides cannot go beyond the phenomenal world. They can't go beyond what are the limitations of our own mind, human mind. So although the ambitions of reason and the nature of reason is infinite, human mind is finite. And this infinite and that's why, according to Kant, at least theoretical reason cannot provide us with conclusive unities or conclusive explanations or overall unities, which are not just formal unities but real unities. And both Iqbal and Hegel contest this idea. And as we saw last time, what they do is through critiquing this dichotomy between finite and infinite. And both Iqbal and Hegel say that finite, the conception of finite we have here is or the conception of infinite we have here is a bad infinite, because it opposes finite to infinite and it locates finite outside infinite. But that's a contradiction according to them, because if finite is outside infinite, that means that finite is actually limiting infinite. It is limiting something which is not supposed to have any limits. Instead of that, both of them present us with a different conception of infinity, where infinity is not opposed to finitude or finite, but finitude is part of infinity at the moment of infinity, or finite is what is potential infinitude in the course of its development. So in that sense, there are no limits, and those limits which are there are there. They are just historical limits. And humanity in its pursuit of truth is going to overcome those limits. And history can be seen as overcoming those limits. So what Kant saw as universal limits of human understanding are actually only historical limits of particular type of human mind and particular type of human understanding, which will be overcome as human progress towards infinity. Humanity progresses towards becoming God or becoming infinite. So this is the story which we have been telling. So let's go back to the text and stop here for today. It is the inadequacy of the logical understanding which finds the multiplicity of mutually repellent individualities with no prospect of their ultimate reduction to a unity that makes us skeptical about the conclusiveness of thought. So it's just the type of understanding which is just a historical understanding and a historical limit which must be overcome one day. In fact, the logical understanding is incapable of seeing this multiplicity as a coherent universe which is interrelated, which is a unity. Its only method is generalization based on resemblances, but its generalizations are only fictitious unities which do not affect the reality of concrete things. So these I call external unities. So concepts through understanding through concepts divide the regions of being and unite them, but it unites them only by dividing them. And those are only formal unities imposed by our understanding. They are not real unities. Real unities can be perceived or understood only through a different type of reason, the reason which doesn't oppose itself to the being, the reason which tries to understand things from within, the reason which try to overcome the historical limits of logical type of understanding. So in its deeper movement, our thought is capable of reaching an imminent infinite. Okay, so we'll look at this next time in more detail. So basically what we have covered today is up to this point. So we'll start from, in fact, the logical understanding is incapable of seeing this multiplicity as a coherent universe. We'll look at this more closely in the next section. Thank you. Dankeschön.